Boots, Bats and Balls on Six Towns Radio.
Right, this is Dave Lee for Six Towns Radio. I'm very pleased to be able to say I've got the author of a great cricketing book on the line. We've spoken to him before. We'll speak to him again, I'm sure. It is Dan Whiting. Are you there, Dan?
Hello, Dave. How are you?
Great to speak to you. Now, I want to talk about your new book, Characters of Cricket.
Yeah.
But before I do, there is something in there that is deeply disturbing me. And
Go on.
And like there's only one thing in that book that's deeply disturbing me. It's your apparently great hatred of the great composer Ludwig van Beethoven.
No, not really. I've got nothing against Beethoven. When the cricket was always rained off in the 70s, we used to watch the John Player League on a Sunday afternoon, and they used to sort of put classical music on instead. They didn't have any sort of highlights to show back in those days, so they used to put a picture of a wicket-keeper's gloves and put classical music on it, and it always reminds me of rainy Sunday afternoons when I was a kid, so always associated it with, sort of deep, disturbing images of my childhood, really, so...
Traumatised by Beethoven, if only he knew. Now, a few years ago, was it a couple of years ago, wasn't it? We were talking about your book, Cricket Banter, Chat, Sledging and Laughs from the Middle Stump, of course.
Right, yeah.
And the Middle Stump, of course, is your webpage.
Yeah.
I was listening to the interview and you were saying you've got like 5,000 followers on Twitter. How many have you got now, is it?
It's just over 11,000. It's grown, yeah. I mean, the Middle Stump was only set up 3 years ago, and it's just ballooned, shall we say, It's just, people seem to like it. People seem to like the rubbish that I churn out, and it seems to have just grown organically.
Yeah, it's a huge success, and this is the new book, obviously, that we're going to be talking about, which is Characters of Cricket by Dan Whiting from the Middle Stump, which is hyphenated, Dan Whiting from the Middle Stump. There's loads to talk about this book, but you start off talking about, I would say, your two heroes, who couldn't be more different. One very English cricketing character, and then a leg spinner from the colonies who is complete opposite. Is it sort of like showing the sort of like Jekyll and Hyde of Dan Whiting when you talk about these two characters?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's my schizophrenia creeping in, I think, there, Gower was my hero when I was a kid. I mean, he was, you see things of beauty, Dave, don't you? You see sort of beaches in the Caribbean, or views over the Scottish Highlands, or, a perfectly poured Guinness from the barmaid with a little shamrock in the top, and a David Gower cover drive was one of those things of beauty. And, I think all cricket fans will agree with me on that.
That was a deeply disturbing image of David Gower from your mind. There you go. And then we move on to the leg spinner, Will you say he's one of your heroes as well?
Not really. He wasn't one of my heroes, but he was somebody who changed the game, and he got kids to be interested in leg spin. Kids wanted to grow up kids were growing up in the 80s. They wanted to bowl quick. The West Indians were in the ascendancy then, and kids wanted to bowl quick. And then Warnie came along, and he was this sort of bleach blonde, sort of surfy Aussie type guy who was bowling leg spin. And leg spin was a dying art then, and kids suddenly wanted, even over here, wanted to bowl out the back of the hand and bowl leg spin, and he did change it. But, I haven't eulogised over Warnie in any shape or any form. I've actually come up with, a few of his idiosyncrasies, shall we say.
Yes, you have, and there's a lot I learnt about him from reading your section.
He's a genius with a cricket ball in his hand, but put a mobile phone in his hand, and he's not so great, so...
He's the master of sledging, I think. Is he sort of like top of the list of sledge?
He's up there. He's definitely up there. I mean, he's constantly in the batsman's ear, and I think that's one of his weapons, I think, especially a leg spinner, it hasn't got the pace where he's going to knock somebody's head off, and he's not going to be aggressive, so he has to put people off their game in other ways. And, some of his sledging over the years has been hilarious. Calling Ian Bell the Shermanator the other year due to his, looking like the geek out of American Pie. And some of it, has been quite amusing. Some of it's been a lot of rubbish as well, Dave, to be honest with you, but generally it's been quite amusing.
And now he's encouraging people to look after their hair.
Yeah, he does that, doesn't he? But since he's not with Liz Hurley anymore, but he went through a stage when he was with Liz Hurley, and he went to look very odd, didn't he? He looked like a waxworker, too close to the fire, so...
If Liz Hurley said that's what you want, I'd say sure, that...
I've got an Aussie friend of mine, and he actually has become quite un-Australian, and that is one of the biggest sort of derogatory terms that Aussie could call each other,
Yeah, it's not just about Shane and David Gower. There are lots of other stories in the book. Tell us a bit more about what's in the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to write about not necessarily the best players, but the guys who have emptied the bars and people who you want to and the characters of the game. And, you know, there are people in there, obviously, like the Shane Warnes and the David Gowers and the Kevin Petersons, who are sort of well known, but there are other less known characters in there as well. And there's some sort of quite some sad stuff in there, you know, with people like Mark Vermeulen, who's the Zimbabwean opening batsman, who ended up having a few mental health problems and ended up burning down the Zimbabwe Cricket Academy, actually.
Ooh,
And a guy called Paul Smith as well, who was a Warwickshire, who was one of the best players, or potentially one of the best players ever. And unfortunately, he got his career finished due to a drug ban, and he ended up living in Los Angeles, homeless in Compton, which is one of the roughest areas of Los Angeles, and it's quite a sad story, but he's cleaned himself up and he's managed to sort himself out now, so, you know, fingers crossed.
It's a fabulous book for stories like this, and if you're a cricket enthusiast, I think it's an absolutely brilliant book, and it is out on the History
Press, yeah, the publishers. So I'd advise, you know, all of your listeners to get their copy now, you know, because it'll be in all good charity shops for 30p in 6 months. So,
But no, it was also raising money for a good cause, though, isn't it?
Yeah, donations to Melanoma UK, like the first book, and you know, we do a lot of work with the charity Melanoma UK, who they've got a number of cricketers as ambassadors for them. They've got Andy Flower and Ryan Sidebottom, and obviously cricketers are exposed to prolonged periods of sunshine, so it makes sense that they're involved with cricketers.
So the final question, actually, I was going to ask you is: just been walking out in this cold, wet, and damp, you know, and thinking, where did the summer go? How did the summer go for the cricket? What was your sort of like take on?
Well, it was a strange summer, wasn't it? I mean, obviously it's great to beat the Aussies. I think 2 years ago when we spoke as well, we beat the Aussies then. So you know, you can interview me every year if you want, Dave. You know,
I can see a pattern forming.
It was a very weird summer because one side either smashed the other one. There was no close games in this series at all. But what we sort of do remember it for was the hideous LBW reviews from Shane Watson, and I think it's the worst reviews since Egon Ronay came up to Stoke and had an oatcake, you know, so...
That's Stoke-on-Trent for you, that's oatcakes, that's all that. I'm glad you brought that up, yeah.
It's a lovely part of the world, and we've got a few followers from up in Stoke-on-Trent, and they're good people up there, good people.
Absolutely, yeah, right. Well, I think we should move on to speak to somebody about oatcakes now. So Dan, thanks, Dan will talk to us on... Right, oatcakes, can you talk us about...
I've never had an oatcake.
Anyway, right, thanks for talking to us.
No problem, it's been a pleasure, Dave.
Hope the book is a success, which I'm sure it will be. It is Characters of Cricket by Dan Whiting. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dave. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.